try to talk to them as if you're just more curious. And everything in psychology is about curiosity without judgment. Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Journey. Today, myself and JP wanted to do a quick discussion about ego because in our Facebook group, we have a lot of people discussing ego and narcissism. And so I thought I'd bring the most narcissistic person I know on to talk about this with me. So
I'm glad you brought yourself.
So I brought myself to the party.
What's your thoughts on narcissism and ego?
Every time there's any ego or narcissism, it's always a root of fear, which usually manifests into insecurity, which can manifest into narcissism. I think it's a defensive mechanism. The challenge is, I find that most people that come off that way typically have lower self-awareness. So I don't think there's that usually bad intention behind it, to be honest. I really don't.
I'd agree with you on that. I also think, and we all have an ego that we need to manage, and some people manage it better than others. And I think the fundamental thing is you can't change people. You can leverage what you know about somebody's personality in order for them to change themselves. You put me on to, the 6 human needs of Tony Robbins. And he would say that certainty and significance are like the core needs of most of the population, and significance being heavily linked to ego and narcissism and how you're perceived in the world and wanting to dominate and these types of things. So, if you're talking about narcissism as in I am a narcissist and how do I best deal with it, right? Or my friend, family member, loved one is a narcissist, how do I deal with it? They're like 2 different questions, right?
Correct.
So if I take the first one, like I'm a narcissist. True story. How would you, Josh, best advise me to deal with it?
So I think that, so would you say like you're a self-aware narcissist, or people keep telling you are?
Yeah, so hypothetically speaking, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I'm not a self-aware narcissist. I have no awareness of the consequences of my behavior. I'm just solely focused on being number one, winning, being perceived as dominant, being respected, being perceived as successful, whatever all these things are.
So this is good because, so we talk about the Enneagram a lot on this channel, but what's interesting is every single personality type, there's 9, every single one of them, when they get unhealthy, at their worst, they get narcissistic traits actually. However, people that, there's some types that are much more prone to at least be perceived that way. Okay, so the first thing, I think, if I was gonna have a conversation with someone who's like that, first I need to see if they're even open to. If they're a narcissist, they're gonna have a lot of walls, right? So that's gonna be tough. So I guess general advice would have to be try to get them to take a personality test. So I think Myers-Briggs is probably the most popular these days. Obviously, I'm a huge Enneagram fan, but there's Dark Triad, there's Hexaco, there's quite a bit. And the Hexaco actually tells you where you are on the scale of narcissism. So it actually has that as one of the 3 things that it's going to tell you. So it's going to say like you're 50% narcissist or whatever. But anywho, the challenge with talking to someone like that is they're going to have some type of a wall, and you got to be skilled enough to try to get through that wall. And that's going to be a freaking challenge.
Well, you see, this is where I think the special magic formula is, right? Most people are aware enough if somebody else is a narcissist, right?
Right.
Okay, so in this scenario, I'm a narcissist, and you're going to try and leverage my narcissism in order to help me optimize my behavior, let's say, right? Often I see the main challenge as people come from their own perspective, and they try to communicate with the person based on their own beliefs, right? So they'll try to say to them, do you not know you're a narcissist? Do you not know you're hurting everybody around you? When perhaps they should be saying, you know what, people would think you were so awesome if you tried this or that, you could be even better at, leveraging the ego to a certain degree. How would you say that the best way to approach approach that would be on their own terms, on the narcissist's terms, let's say?
Great question, man. So I think there is going to be a little variance because one, is it like your boss, or is it someone that's equal to you? Is it a family member? Is it a friend? Like, these things kind of make a big difference. However, if you try to come at somebody that's a narcissist aggressively, they're going to shut down faster, make your head spin, right? So that's not going to work. So I actually really liked what you said, actually, where you're like, you have so many good traits, but like if with this, if you got more self-awareness in this sense, then you'd be like awesome, right? Like really, really good. So that's a great question, man. I think I guess a general thing to do would be try to talk to them as if you're just more curious. And everything in psychology is about curiosity without judgment, right? So you don't ever want to judge any scenario if you can help it, right? So I think if you can kind of just first, you got to get curious yourself and just get your emotions out of it, right? Step back and then think. It's like, okay, why is this person being this way, right? Because Enneagram Type 3 coming off that way and an Enneagram Type 8 coming off that way is completely different motives. So first you have to see, so step back. And the only way to truly see them for who they are is you have to take out judgment, right? So just be like, I wonder if they have any pain. And then just kind of observe, like, what is the message they're really trying to get across? So maybe they're just not feeling heard. And this is their mechanism of trying to be heard, right? So I think if you can try to sit back and observe, find the need, and then meet them with compassion, right? So find a place of compassion to understand if they're a narcissist, they have pain, period. They have pain. They feel inadequate and they feel like they need to, they're not enough. So try to have compassion for that. And then if you speak to them, try to speak from a point of curiosity with compassion. But I think that if you come from those places, at least it'll be a lot softer approach that they may be able to absorb, and just don't go too aggressively up front. But the other half of this, and I know I'm going on a little tangent, but you don't want to go in with the intention of trying to change somebody, because forget it, it's not gonna. So that's why the compassion will take the resentment out of you, which is the most important part. And then things won't bother you that when they act like this. Actually, just kind of be funny, because you're like, oh man, I see what you're doing. Just try to be there for them emotionally for whatever's missing. So whatever the pieces that's missing from them, I would suggest try to tell them, hey, you don't have, like, you're cool without your cars and your money and all that stuff.
Like, people struggle with what compassion really is. Sometimes it can be difficult to be compassionate in the moment, when you're faced with certain things, right? Particularly from people that have a lot of ego or narcissistic, as I have been at times, like definitely in my past. But pity, I always find, like, going to pity is a much stronger emotion than compassion for me personally. In a particularly emotionally charged situation, pity is almost where I try to go to. Like, I try to pity the person. I try to actually genuinely feel sorry for them, as opposed to compassionate. And feeling sorry for somebody is a form of compassion. The other thing, you had mentioned the techniques that would be useful in a situation like this. I mean, if we were to bring it subjectively to an actual subject and scenario, right? So if you say, for example, if somebody like myself, like, what type of questions would you like? How would the conversation go? Because again, to go back to Tony Robbins, his philosophy seems to be that we all need to be psychologists. We all need to sort of very, very quickly ascertain where people are in terms of their human needs, which the 6 human needs sort of dominating. And then we need to communicate to them on their level, being cognizant of what their needs are and what the best means of communicating with them are. So what would you say are good examples of how you could not trigger a narcissist? What type of conversation openers, how would you do the discovery work around the whys?
Firstly, you gotta get yourself an emotionally sober place. Like, you just have to. You can't come in there judgmental. It will never go good for you. That's the first step, right? That's because that's the foundation, is why I bring that up. What
you're saying is, get your state right. Become emotionally centered and stable. Be curious, compassionate, show a bit of in the extreme sense, pity if you're struggling with compassion, and then trying to understand those things that will trigger the person and avoiding them. Try to go around it. And also, I think a big thing is to genuinely not judge it as a bad thing, because
It's really not. Their highest value is significance, right? So that's okay. That's okay. Just understand that their highest value is significance, and that's okay to do. Don't try not to think of it as morally right or wrong. That's gonna be pretty important. And if you could, that's easier said than done. But if you are able to do that, the tension will dissipate, and now you can actually get what you want out of the relationship with that person.
If somebody's narcissism is affecting you and them negatively, and it's dominating, then it's just unhealthy, and like it's perhaps your responsibility and their responsibility to bring it back into healthiness, right?
That's right. Or under stress or free from stress. So when you're under stress, that's technically you're going to be in that state, right, where your lower side will come out.
If you don't admit to yourself actually your own nature, you can't optimize it. That's often where this unbalance comes from, I find, in people.
That's right. No, that was a great point. And another thing on that is, like, I notice a lot of people will judge people based on behavior. So they'll be like, oh, he's a type 3 because he's ambitious. You don't want to think that way. You got to think the motivation behind the behavior. So not the behavior, but the motivation behind it. Because Enneagram type 6s can be extremely scared, insecure people. However, Tupac was an Enneagram type 6. He was like a beast from the East, man. Like but they both had the same motive. He had a lot of fear, but he just ran toward the fear. It's the same thing as Enneagram type 6, a regular phobic 6. They run from it, and counter 6 runs toward it, but they're still type 6. Yeah. So it's just something to think about. Is always try to look at the motive, right? That's why you have to get curious, because you don't want to look at behavior, you want to look at motive, and that helps you not judge too.
As you had mentioned before, like we'll take the Enneagram for example. There every type in the Enneagram and every person in existence has the ability to show ego or narcissistic traits. But what would you say are the types of the Enneagram in which those traits are most dominant?
Sure. So that's going to be types with, you can look at it from a Tony Robbins standpoint. They're always going to have the highest level of significance. And then from an Enneagram standpoint, it's usually the more emotional types. It can be because the emotional types comes with a lot of shame. So they feel a lot of shame, so then they'll feel inadequate. But that's not always necessarily true, because the type 2 will be, Mother Teresa's a type 2. So I don't know her at all, but I'm just saying a standard type 2, like at average levels of health or lower levels of health, they feel shame and they feel inadequate, so they try to over-help as many people as humanly possible. Which doesn't sound like a bad thing, but the challenge is they put everybody in front of them. But anyway, so here's the types that if you're one of these types, just try to gain some self-awareness and ask people who's will tell you the truth to see if they feel like you might have some of these traits. And Enneagram type 3, for sure, I would say that's probably the most common, because type 3s typically get their value from external people, from what Jay Shetty has a quote that says, "I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am, but I am what I think that you think I am." That's common for type 3s big time. Type 4 as well, because they're all about being unique and seen. So they want to be seen too, but they do it through uniqueness. The type 3 does it through achieving, right? Through being like, look how me, I'm a big deal. Okay. A type 7, especially 7s with an 8 wing, they can come off that way big time. But the thing about 7s is they lack a lot of self-awareness by nature, and they don't realize they're coming off that way because they're so in their own head. But like they'll have a conversation with you, and then they'll cut you off because they just want to finish their thought, because there's so much energy in us, and sometimes it's hard to just contain it and relax it. Like you always have this tendency to like say something and like be, exert the energy. So type 7s like a Gary Vaynerchuk can come off that way. He's a type 7, so that might be he's a 7 with an 8 wing too. 8 wings, they'll have a lot more charged, so you can see that in that. And then definitely a type 8. So type 8s is Simon Cowell's a type 8 from American Idol. So that's a great example of a type 8. So you can see how people can say that he's narcissistic, but the interesting thing is 8s are also misjudged. They're usually not very narcissistic. They're not really rooted as a narcissist. It's just more comes off that way in their delivery. Because he'll be like, hey, that was the worst thing I ever heard in my life. You suck. Stop singing. That was
just being honest.
Yeah. So in their mind, because I have some 8 traits in me because I'm a 7. So I'm very about justice, and so they are too. And in their mind, they're doing you a disservice if they're not honest with you and direct. And that's the way you want to communicate with someone like that. But 8s and 3s look so much alike, and if you did that to a 3, they can be so insecure at average and lower levels of health where they're gonna flip out. But an 8 will actually love and respect you for that, and they actually like if you stand up to them and fight. So it's two. The behavior looks almost identical, but the motivation is completely different. Hopefully that was helpful. We are the entrepreneur's journey. You are part of our journey to
have an amazing life with us. If you want to have an amazing life, just subscribe and like and comment and share.
That's right.
Amazing life coming right up.